Welcome, everyone, to today's event, Money Talks Financial Literacy for Students with Megumi Smission. I am so excited to hear her speak today. I'm so excited to see all of you again and for you all to join us in one of our first events for the Life Literacy Events team. We've been working on this event for roughly 3 months now, and I'm so excited to see it to fruition and to have all of you here with us today. But before we begin, just a quick disclaimer regarding COVID-19. Today's event may include references or information about the experiences of people during the COVID-19 pandemic, whether it be through reflections or stories. We are Life Literacy and your primary source for information about coronavirus. And to keep to date with all safety measures and case data, please use your government websites, healthcare providers, and trusted affiliated public health officials and organizations. So without further ado, we first need to acknowledge the land. So because Life Literacy is a Canadian organization, we do take the moment before any of our events to do a land acknowledgement. Because we technically operate on the land of Montreal, we need to first acknowledge the land in which we would be operating on. So we would like to begin today's event by acknowledging the traditional lands in which we operate, which are the unceded territory of the Mohawk, a place that has long served as a site of meeting and exchange amongst nations. And now typically, as I am your head presenter, I would also acknowledge the land in which I operate. Land in which I operate is the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe, Huron-Wendat, Haudenosaunee, specifically the Iroquois, Ojibwe, Chippewa peoples, and home to the Métis. The territory in which I reside is covered by the Upper Canada Treaties. So to anyone who is joining us from outside of Canada or is not familiar on the subject of land acknowledgements, we do land acknowledgements as a Canadian civil organization and movement to show respect for the land. We are a part of the movement towards reconciliation with Indigenous communities in Canada. And by acknowledging our land, we acknowledge that the land we operate on has ancient traditional roots and relationships. And though we are all members of historically underrepresented communities, we are still uninvited settlers onto this land. And we need to acknowledge the ways that we benefit from the lasting system of settler colonialism and to be accountable to the Indigenous communities that have had relationships on this land for thousands of years. Currently, I'm actually residing in Caledonia, Ontario, where there is the ongoing conflict between the Haudenosaunee and the provincial government. We at Lives for Literacy stand with the Haudenosaunee as they currently go through this land title claim regarding Foxgate development and the subdivision that is trying to be built on their unceded land. We also stand with the Wet'suwet'en as they fight against the pipeline in British Columbia and are going through constant battle and current fight with legislation in British Columbia. But, we've established all of this, but who are we? Some of you here might not actually know who we are at Lives for Literacy. So hi, we're Lives for Literacy. We're a grassroots movement dedicated to eradicating illiteracy and raising awareness to the beauty of education. We're based out of Montreal, Canada, with execs from all over the country and all over the world. And we are working with all of you worldwide to do events like this, programs like this, and awesome campaigns to promote our mission. So without further ado, I would like to throw it over to our president and founder, Yasmin, as she does her welcome for today's event.
Thank you very much, Cyan. Hi, everyone. I'm Yasmin Farah, the president and founder of Lives for Literacy. Thank you all for being here today. And if I have to say a bit about myself, I'll say that I'm a third-year student studying political science, and I'm minoring in human rights. Thank you very much.
Hi, I'm Cyan Prasad, and I'm the director/vice president of events here at Lives for Literacy. It's my job to coordinate cool things like this and reach out to amazing people like Megumi who will volunteer their time with us to put on these awesome events. I am also a third-year undergraduate student. I'm currently studying at the University of Toronto, and I am also a double major in political science and health studies and a minor in sociology. I'm so excited to be here with all of you today and getting to do really cool work like this. So why are we here? Well, usually I would go on a huge tangent about 5 to 10 minutes long about all the things that we are going to be doing today, but I get to take a breather. So I'm going to throw it over to Yasmin, who will be officially introducing our speaker and the rest of today's event.
I'd like to welcome Megumi Smission, who is the creator and host of Miss Money Talks on the Believe podcast network, where she discusses everything from budgeting strategies to the racial wealth gap. Previously, she has lived paycheck and paid thousands of dollars in credit card debt. All of this has provided hard-won lessons about the detriments of a lack of financial education in a society that discourages talking about money. Her goal is to share her personal financial journey to both educate and encourage others to discuss this taboo topic without sacrificing avocado toast or iced coffee.
So without further ado, it's all yours. Just let me know how to go through your slides.
Cool. Thank you guys so much for that introduction. Hello, everyone. As they've said, I'm Megumi Smisson, and today we're going to be talking about financial literacy. And before I get started, there will be some points where I ask you to write down some of your thoughts or goals. So have a paper and pen or your phone or whatever handy. And as Cyan has said before, feel free to chime in to the live discussion via the chat as well. All right, let's get started. Next slide, please. So what is financial literacy? What does it actually mean? So financial literacy is understanding how to manage your money and understanding how to grow your money. So this includes understanding your income, right? Exactly how much you're making and how much of that is going towards things like taxes, being able to pick the right credit card for you, being able to save for vacations and retirement, understanding how to create a budget and stick to it, understanding about investing, loans, basically all of these different things that add up to adulting. And I get it, at the beginning, financial literacy sounds kind of boring, and it was for me too. And maybe, at least for me, it was a little bit like a lot of math. Like I felt like if I wasn't good with numbers, I wouldn't be good with my money or finances. So as it was said in my introduction, I was not financially literate until embarrassingly late in life. I grew up very lucky in that I didn't really have to worry about money. I went to some great private schools in Japan where I grew up, and then also in the US, received a wonderful private education. And not once did anyone teach me anything about financial education, right? I learned about, I'm in the US, and I learned about the, Boston Tea Party and why we have taxes and taxation without representation, but no one was like, here's where your taxes go, or here's what to do with your taxes. And I knew the very basics, right? I understood theoretically why a budget was important, or that I couldn't be just spending boatloads of money that I didn't have, and that, credit cards weren't actually this magic piece of plastic that meant that I could buy whatever I wanted. I had this general understanding that money management is important, but it seemed not urgent, like something that future Megumi, adult Megumi, would need to deal with, but like I don't need to deal with this right now. So after college, I had a few well-paying full-time jobs. So as long as I didn't splurge, I could live a pretty comfortable life. For those of you that maybe use or have heard of the budgeting site mint.com, I had a mint.com account, set up my budgeting goals and everything, and then I never logged in again, just completely ignored it because I thought it was going to be fine. I had a retirement plan through my employer, had savings to go on vacation, didn't have debt. It was not great, but definitely not bad either. What started going downhill was when I quit my job a few years later and started acting, and decided to move to LA, picked up some random waitressing and bartending jobs, realized that I had blown through the very little savings that I had and was not only living paycheck to paycheck, the cliche starving artist situation, but had somehow magically racked up thousands of dollars in credit card debt. And this is not fun to admit. It's super embarrassing, right? I don't want to be the 30-year-old who's like, yeah, I just got out of thousands of dollars of credit card debt. I'm supposed to be able to, I guess I'm technically already an adult, and this isn't even the result of me spending on something extravagant or I went on some fancy trip and that's why I was in debt. I literally just wasn't managing my money properly. I didn't understand the interest I had to pay on my credit card debt. I didn't create a proper budget that reflected my drastically lower level of income after I quit my full time job. And most importantly, I was terrified. I used everything from just ignoring the money completely, being ashamed, refused to talk about it, just did not want to look at my bank account or my bank statement and acknowledge what was happening. So I don't know if any of you have felt that dreadful feeling, like when you've completely bombed a test or an assignment, like you don't even want to know the grade that you got. You don't want to open that report card because you know it's going to be bad. That's how I felt about my bank account. And I knew eventually, like ignoring it wasn't going to make it any better. There was no magic money tree that could help me. And so I just had to face this problem. And that all started with educating myself about money management. It started with financial literacy. So, this stuff that I knew was important, but not really interesting when I was younger, when I was much of your age. And this stuff that is somehow so important, right? But none of us, or most of us, are not educated about. So, why did I just tell you this really embarrassing story about myself? I'm sharing this with you because my goal is to encourage people to talk more about money. Not all of us, hopefully, are going to make the same mistakes I did. And I don't think that that needs to happen in order for you to talk about money. But money is such a taboo topic today. And especially that combined with the fact that we don't learn about money creates this environment where people don't feel comfortable asking people for their money questions. And not that you should just go up to people and say, hey, how much money do you make? But why aren't we more able to discuss with our friends our savings goals, our budgeting tips and tricks, just being able to talk more comfortably about money in general, instead of having this be this rude, weird, hush hush secret conversation that we're not supposed to have? So my goal today is hopefully to have you learn from my mistakes and learn from my journey, and at least understand at the core, if the only thing you take away from today is understanding that money management, that financial education is important. Um, so yeah, first, next slide, please. I want to congratulate you all on being here. Congratulations on adulting. You are so far ahead of where I was when I was your age. So I really want to commend you for taking time out of your weekend to be here. I know that, especially for those of you in high school, college, there are so much more exciting things to do on a weekend. In the US, it's Super Bowl weekend. So I truly mean it when I say congratulations on taking action towards educating yourself on something that is so key to adulting. And honestly, this puts you ahead of 45% of Americans and 32% of Canadians who are financially illiterate. So just taking this first step is so important. And I promise I will do my best to make this not only educational and entertaining, but at least somewhat interactive. So again, I just shared my embarrassing money story. This is a safe money space, so please contribute to the discussion if you'd like. All right. So why is financial literacy so important? Next slide, please. So let's talk about what aspect of your life is affected by money. So if you can take a minute, write down on your piece of paper, your phone, whatever, how money affects you and your family today. It can be anything from buying snacks after school, vacations you take or don't take, things you want to buy, but your parents won't let you, anything that you want. And feel free to share in the discussion as well. I'll give you guys a minute to do that. All right. I see Leah says everything is affected by money. So true. We have student debt, college tuition, buying textbooks for school, paying for gas, groceries, post-pandemic social outings, even the virtual events, right? Not this one, but if you're doing like a virtual happy hour, you'll probably have to pay for, I don't know, food, drinks, things like that. All aspect of my life is affected by money. Yeah. So there are so many examples, right, of the different ways that money can affect us. There's the easier day-to-day things to think about, like some people said food, clothes, your textbooks, laptops. And then there's the bills like housing, your phone, internet, tuition, travel. And then there are things that sort of the larger things, right, that you might not necessarily think about on a day-to-day basis, like your credit score or retirement. I certainly did not think about retirement or my credit score when I was younger, but both of these things are so important and can be affected by the financial decisions that you make when you are young. Like, for example, your credit score, my credit score was damaged when I had all of that credit card debt. And that could have, I was extremely lucky in that I was able to get out of that debt and boost my credit score back up again. But that could have made it really hard to apply to a new apartment, or if I needed to get a loan to buy a new car, for example, or a mortgage, all of those things would have been affected by the fact that I had a low credit score or applying for a new credit card. And then there's the even larger things that revolve around money, like the gender pay gap, the racial wealth gap, income inequality, just broader terms like the economy. I think, especially during this past year with the pandemic, all over the world, people are talking about the financial and economic effects of the pandemic, right? Whether it's people losing their jobs and getting pay cuts, or talking about the cost of healthcare, the cost of health insurance, the cost to make these vaccines, to distribute these vaccines. Are the vaccines going to be free? All of those things revolve around money. And for the students dealing, again, like some people said, tuition, student loans, if you are maybe being able to study virtually, go to class remotely from home, but maybe you weren't able to get out of your student housing. So you're still having to pay for student housing, for on-campus housing while you're not living there. So all of these different things affect us from day to day to broader things. So money is such an important part of our lives that affect everything. Next slide, please. So I think seeing it in this way, how money impacts almost every part of your life, that shows why financial literacy is so important, because financial literacy is what gives us the tools to make smart, or at least smarter, money decisions, right? And people who are financially illiterate tend to save less money, they have more debt, and they need to borrow money more often and then pay higher interest on those loans, and are just generally less able to plan financially for the future, including retirement or travel, vacations, what have you. Next slide, please. So now that we know why financial education is important, let's rewind a bit and talk about how we think about money. So I want you to write down, take another minute and talk, or write down what are some of your earliest memories around money. It could be related to your family, other people around you, whatever you'd like. And then feel free to share in the chat again if you'd like. Right, so we have Ahmad said living in inexpensive apartments, save, really making fun purchases. people getting allowances, or always getting whatever I wanted as a child with no issues. I worked very hard in school, but never really earned my money. Someone else says asking my money to pay for a school trip. Yeah. So there's all these different ways that people grew up differently, right? And it could be based on how your parents talked about money or acted around money or didn't talk about money, whether you, like some people said, had an allowance or not, whether you were on scholarships, as someone said. Someone says spending without thinking about investing when they were younger. And some people, as they were saying, might have been very acutely aware that their family did not have a lot while they were growing up, whereas others might not have realized it, right? You don't realize until you go to school later in life that not everyone grew up traveling the world first class with their family. You might have also been influenced by TV and movies you watched and social media. Maybe this is going to age me, but if you watched, I don't know, Entourage or Gossip Girl, Sex and the City, any of those shows where they're just spending, or like Friends, right, is the typical show that everyone likes to talk about, where these people who worked as a waitress or cooks and they had this massive apartment in Manhattan by Central Park. That doesn't make any sense. And so, and they were just spending all the time, all of these things that influence the way you think about money. Like I said, I was very lucky growing up. I didn't really like buying things, but at the few times that I did really want something, I didn't get an allowance. And so I would have to convince my dad to buy me things because he was the one who worked. My mom took care of me. And I would always ask, hey, can I have X, Y, and Z? My mom would say, ask your father. And I would go to my dad, and it was so frustrating because most of the time he would say maybe. But if I was really, which meant no, we all know that maybe means no. And if I kept on insisting, like, please, I really want this thing, he would squat down so that we were at eye level. And he would ask me, why do you need this thing so badly? And if you can convince me, if you have a good, logical, or rational reason for why you need it, then I will buy this for you. And of course, because so and so in class has it wasn't a good enough reason. So that was one of my earliest money memories of just being so frustrated because I wanted this thing so badly, but there's no reason why I had to have it. I just wanted it. And I'm not trying to say that my dad, never bought me something on a whim or whatever, but those were my frustrating earlier money memories. So my goal here is not to say that one way of growing up is better than another. All I want right now is for us to be honest, at least with ourselves, about what money means to us. Oh, I love it. Science says, I remember making a presentation to convince my parents to send me to camp. Yeah, exactly. I see those the Instagram videos, YouTube videos of the kids who are making a presentation about why they should be allowed to have a dog, things like that. That's the level I was at, but I was like so stressed out because my dad's eyes were right here on eye level. Anyway, so now that we have those sort of earlier money memories, let's take a second to jot down just a few words about how you think or feel about money today. How did some of these experiences influence you? When you think money, what are the first things that come to mind? Ooh, science says my credit card bill. Been there. Investing, making more from what you have, something to be cautious about. Someone says, I feel angry as it seems people do things just for financial gain or to put in money around the world. Someone else says, kind of scary because I don't really get it. Yeah, these are all like very valid feelings around this thing that affects every part of us, right? Like I felt extremely stressed, anxious, guilty for being in debt. There were times when I was younger and I wasn't in debt, when I might be planning trips or brunches, like people were saying, social outings with my friends. And there were times when I was making more than my friends, for example, or I just was able to borrow more money from my parents than my friends, or they could pay for vacations for me. And you have this awkward conversation where someone can afford, if I picked a fancy restaurant, for example, but someone else couldn't afford it, there's always that unevenness. So whether you're guilty for having too much money, guilty for not having enough money. Someone else says, that's my new way as of 2021 before planning planning what I would spend my money on, right? Like budgeting, all these different things tend to be negative, right? No one was like, money makes me feel good. I'm really happy about money. Everyone's like, it's scary. I'm stressed about it. And yet, again, we don't learn about it. So this is part of why I think it's important to at least acknowledge these feelings, right? So, Simon, can go to the next slide. The very first step, right? Understanding what we already believe about money and being honest about our relationship with money. Because if you were like me, I was so stressed, felt super guilty about my credit card bill, but I didn't want to admit it. And I didn't want to look at my bank account. I wanted to just pretend that everything was fine, everything's good, and it'll go away, but it won't. So I think that at least if we can acknowledge that this is something that's really important to us, whether we like that or not, and B, acknowledge, hey, you know what, these are kind of the feelings I have about it, and it might be uncomfortable, but that's okay. We can acknowledge that and move forward from there. And then taking a financial state of the union, which I'll get into in a second. So next slide, please. So that brings us to the B word, right? Budgeting, the most exciting, sexy money topic of all time. I'm sure everyone can agree. So what words come to mind when you first hear budgeting? Open the check. Microsoft Excel, savings, spreadsheet, planning expenses. I had a friend tell me once, oh yeah, cutting back, giving up things, the future, balance. I had a friend once said, budgeting sounds like a lot of work. Limits is a good one. Yeah. Seems like a lot of work. It's restrictive. It's not fun, right? Budgeting just sounds like you hear budgeting and no one's like, ooh, I'm so excited about this. And why is that? Budgeting sounds like, oh, someone is. That's awesome. You're so many more steps ahead of me. Yeah, budgeting is about thinking about the future. But to a lot of people, budgeting can sound like deprivation, right? I get this kind of like mental image of some Scrooge pinching their pennies, and it feels like a lot of work. I got to make this whole spreadsheet. And I think a lot of people think about budgeting the same way we think about diets. It's really restrictive. You're just thinking about it the whole time. You hate it the whole time. And all you can think about are these things that you're not supposed to be eating. And then you do it for a couple of weeks and you hate it the whole time. And by that point, you're so hungry that all you want to do is just eat all the pizzas. And as a lot of you know, research has shown that diets don't really work in the long term, because as soon as we start restricting ourselves, all of that food that we're not supposed to be eating is suddenly looking extra tempting. And I think it's the same with budgeting. We focus on all these things that we're not supposed to be spending on. We're focused on restricting ourselves, on limiting ourselves. And then we either correct it by doing the exact opposite and just saying, screw it, I'm just going to spend all this money. Or if you do go outside of your budget a little bit, you just feel super guilty, which also isn't really productive either. So let's first understand why budgeting is important, and then we can find ways to make it at least a little bit more exciting. Next slide, please. So why is budgeting important? Like I said, you're taking your financial state of the union. You're understanding, like really understanding your income, your debt, savings, expenses. And this is, right, a time to be honest, right? This isn't the time to pretend your bank account doesn't exist or everything will magically fix itself. And it is going to be work. You need to sit down and track in detail what you're spending your money on, how much you're actually spending on food, on entertainment, on any subscriptions you might have forgotten to cancel, everything. And I get that at the beginning, this might seem like a lot of work, but there are, for example, apps like mint.com, which I mentioned before. There's one which is not free, but is also a great one called You Need a Budget, or YNAB. Or like some people have said here, spreadsheet, Excel, just tracking everything, even by hand if you'd like. Again, the point is being honest about how much money is actually coming in, what you're actually spending it on, and then sort of categorizing it and what do you need to spend money on. Like you need to eat. That doesn't mean you need to spend an extravagant amount of money on food, but you do need to eat, you need to pay the bills. And then what you want to spend money on, what are you excited to spend on? and then creating a budget that works for you. And one way to sort of motivate ourselves to create this budget is, again, instead of thinking about it as this restrictive thing, think about it as maximizing your money, not limiting it, right? Let's focus on what your money is going towards instead of what it's not going towards, because you worked hard for your money. It should go towards things that you value, that are important to you. And another thing to know, just like this diet example, and like I said before, once you create this budget, you'll probably cheat, and that's fine. That's okay. A budget, it's not going to be 100% perfect every time. And maybe, you make a budget one month, realize that it's just not realistic and you need to change it the next time. Or maybe you go through a few different iterations of budgeting. And that's completely normal. That doesn't mean that you've failed or this isn't working or what have you. The important part is that you made a budget and you are making an effort towards managing your money. And even that alone puts you ahead. Only 49% of Canadians have a budget, and only 40% of Americans have a budget. So just taking this budgeting step, thinking about where your money is going, is such a huge, huge step. So like I said, you worked hard for this money, right? So we can go to the next slide. One great example of a way of thinking about your money is in terms of cost per hours worked. So let's say, hypothetically, you make $20 an hour, right? You have a new laptop, that's $600 an hour, maybe a bar tab, that's $200 an hour. That new laptop is 30 hours of work. That's almost a whole week's worth, right? Or you have the bar tab, which is worth 10 hours of work. That's more than a day of work. Is that bar tab really worth it? And maybe that new laptop, for example, you need a new laptop. That's non-negotiable. You need to budget for that. But maybe you realize, hey, maybe I don't need to be racking up this much at the bar tab every single weekend. This is something I can cut back on, right? So it's finding those ways of just what is more valuable to you? What is your hard earned money actually going towards? And maybe a system, if this system doesn't work for you, that's fine. But this is just one way of finding a way to put some context behind those numbers instead of just blindly thinking, oh, it's $100, $200. Thinking of it more as like, okay, this is 2 days worth of work, for example. So next slide. So you might still be thinking, this still sounds very boring and like a lot of work, and it is a lot of work. And for example, I think someone had mentioned in the chat that, yeah, when you're budgeting, you do need to categorize your spending. And part of that is going to be putting money towards the future, towards planning, towards savings. So one of the ways that you might hear people talking about this is paying yourself first. A lot of people say as soon as you get your paycheck, you pay yourself first. And what does that mean? That means putting money in for you, not towards bills, towards future you. But a lot of people, especially when they're younger, it can be hard, right, to motivate yourself to pay yourself first and put money into savings, especially when it's like, oh, it's Friday, it's Saturday, finals are done. All I want to do is just spend money on XYZ. So why is it that we understand, right, this concept of retirement and planning is so important, but why is it sometimes so hard for us to actually act on that? So research has shown that neurologically, people view putting money into savings, into their own savings account, as giving money to a stranger. So basically, current you sees future you as a stranger. So of course, you don't want to give your money to that person. And they also showed that the greatest neural activation differences between thinking about their current selves versus future selves also showed a higher tendency to choose instant gratification over delayed gratification, even if the delayed reward was larger. So I know that was a lot of words. Basically, it showed that the more people felt connected to their future selves, they were more likely to save. The more people felt disconnected, felt their future selves as being a completely different person, they were more likely to choose instant gratification, even if that delayed reward was larger. So how do we bridge this gap, right? How do we convince our brains that this future self is not a total stranger, that this person is worth investing in, is worth putting money towards? So next slide. So one way is to get excited to spend, right? And a study from New York University showed subjects a digitally aged photo of themselves at age 70. So their theory was subjects would be forced to create a more concrete image of their future selves at this distant retirement age in their minds, and therefore would be more likely to set money aside for their future selves. Like if you were able to fully picture yourself, wrinkly, gray haired, see you at retirement age, it would connect you more to that future self, and you would be more likely to put money away towards this wrinkly you. And they were right. The subjects who were shown their 70-year-old selves actually saved twice as much money for retirement as those who were not shown their future selves. And so this is just one way, I don't know if there's, at least when I was using, I don't use Snapchat anymore, but when I was using Snapchat, they had like the old person filter, maybe TikTok. I don't know how these apps work anymore, guys, but if you have Snapchat and they're still doing that, that could be one way. And that doesn't mean we all need to go and like Photoshop ourselves to like super old, but it's more about thinking in more concrete terms about what you are excited to spend your money on. So how do you want to spend your money today, tomorrow, next year, 10 years, so on and so forth, and being super specific about it. So this could be making a vision board, a Pinterest board, a list, pretty much anything, as long as you're being specific and being creative and finding a way to, instead of just thinking, oh yeah, when I'm retired, I want to be retired and not working, or be retired and still be working a little bit, saying more specifically. And I know for you guys, retirement is super far away and even harder to imagine than it is for me, but finding a way to think about, is it that you want to be able to retire and have a really large house so that your friends and family can always come visit? Or maybe you want to be able to retire and be able to travel the world, and you want to do like a trip through Asia and eat all the different foods when you're retiring. So all of these different things, as long as you are more specific about it, it makes it easier to think about what that money is going towards, right? Instead of just thinking, okay, I'm putting money into my 401k, you're thinking, okay, I want to put my money into my 401k because I am excited to retire and travel through Asia, or even outside of retirement. I am excited to put money into my savings account, or into some other investment account because I'm excited to buy this house. So if we go to the next slide, please. This brings us to the next step, which is setting these financial goals, right? So they could be short term. Valentine's Day is coming up. So maybe you want to go all out on Valentine's Day. That means that you need to have budgeted this in, right? If you want to spend $50, $100 on Valentine's Day, that $150, $100, that has to come from somewhere. And if it doesn't come from somewhere, that means you're putting it on your credit card. And that means you are potentially creating this high interest debt. You don't want to do that. So then there's sort of the midterm goals, right? This could be next year, within the next couple of years, taking, for example, a 2-week spa-filled vacation in Bali next year. And then there's something that's more longer term. So of course, retirement falls into this. It could be something like buying a house, raising a family. I know this is still far away for a lot of you guys, but people my age are, they're getting married, having kids. Having kids is expensive. This is something that you need to think about and plan for before you get started, in order to be able to manage your money and your income properly. So I want everyone to write down at least one goal for each. And again, be specific, not just I want to buy a house, but I want to buy a 3-bedroom house with a really large yard so that my 5 rescue dogs can run around in. And you can feel free to share your goals as well. Oh, there's a lot going on in here while I was talking. Love it. We have, all right, goals here. Short-term birthday gift, midterm new car around 10K before taxes, long-term down payment of a $450,000 house, short-term Valentine's Day, midterm upcoming exam expenses, yeah. Long-term moving to another city and expenses revolving around a new life there. Yeah, that's awesome. So all these things, right, by being specific, like this first person was about the house. I live in LA. I walk around my neighborhood. The houses here are like $2 million. It's insane. So thinking about the down payment on a house, I hypothetically, if I wanted to buy a house here, I would have to be super specific. If I was just like, I want to put a down payment on a house, what my goal is versus what someone living in like Ohio's down payment is going to be so different. And sure, our incomes might be different, but that's why it's so important to be specific, because just thinking, yeah, I want to buy a house might not necessarily get you there. And being able to have these concrete plans, right? Like whether it's Valentine's Day or travel or moving to another city, these are all going to have different types of expenses, different types of costs. And so laying it out also makes it so that you are not only setting specific goals, but you can actually reach these goals as well. So if you go to the next slide, one way, for example, to help stay on track of these goals is to break up the end goal into smaller steps. So I'm taking this Bali vacation as an example because that's really where I want to go right now post pandemic. I just need a vacation. So one way I could split that up, right, is into small steps like saving up first for the flight, saving up for the hotel, saving up for the spa costs, food costs, things like that, and then celebrating each step, responsibly. So for example, you have to be specific, and of course, flight costs, hotel costs, those can fluctuate, but it's not really going to fluctuate from like $200 versus $1,000. So once you hit those milestones, you can say, hey, like you don't have to beat yourself up about, oh, I was supposed to do this in 2 months and it's already been a month and a half and I only have X amount saved. You can say, you know what, I have saved up for this part, and this part, and celebrate that. Of course, if you bought $100 flight, you probably shouldn't celebrate that with buying $100 dinner. But if you can just take a second to maybe cook something nice, go out with some friends for something cheap, if you like hiking, maybe you go on like an extra special hike or something, finding ways to celebrate each step. And this could even be, for example, when I was paying off my credit cards, right? Every single time I paid off X amount, I would not spend any money, but congratulate myself. I would tell my boyfriend, hey, I paid off another, X, Y, and Z amount. And he would say, congratulations. I was like, yes, all right, let's keep going. And you kind of got to take those wins so you can keep motivating yourself. Another way is to use peer pressure. A Harvard study showed that peer pressure does actually help people with saving money. So they had some participants meet with a peer group once a week, and these people had to show proof that they were contributing to their savings accounts. And these people actually ended up saving twice as much money as people in a different group who did not have an accountability group. So this could be another way, right? And also another way to encourage your friends to talk about money and being able to be open about your money situation. Creating an accountability and support group with a friend or friends where you can set clear goals and have regular check-ins. And I think what's most important is that this is a group where you can feel comfortable sharing your mistakes, not a place where you feel pressured into spending more money or you're forced to feel guilty if you don't meet these goals, but somewhere that's actually helping you be accountable and being supportive and where you can openly talk about these things. So kind of going into my final finance tips here, if we move on to the next slide. One thing that's super important is don't keep up with the Kardashians. I know the traditional saying is don't keep up with the Joneses, but I think the Kardashians are much more relevant today. And I think, right, we all live in this super consumer centric society. You may have even felt peer pressure in a bad way to spend money. Like if someone, an example I gave before was going out to dinner or brunch, whatever, with your friends. Maybe you feel pressured into going to this fancy restaurant that you can't actually afford, but you feel bad for being the only person who says, well, I can't really afford that. That's not really in my budget. right? You watch TV, you watch the Kardashians, no one's like, actually, I'm on a budget, right? It's always the cool, fun people who are spending money left and right. And the people who are on a budget, who aren't spending money, those are like the boring people, the Debbie Downers, the negative Nancy's, and you're told not to be that person, right? And we're bombarded by ads all the time and how you need to have the newest this and newest that. And I don't want this to become this thing where you start getting obsessive over money and categorizing every dollar as good or bad, because it's also going to depend on each situation and different person. For example, I don't know if you can really see, but I am surrounded by books. I for sure cannot not spend money on books every time, clearly not during the pandemic, but before, when I would go to the airport, especially because I would travel back home to Japan, which is a long flight. So I'd always pack extra books, and I would already have books in my backpack. But for some reason, I could not resist also going to the bookstore in the airport and buying more books. But I have just allowed that to happen. This is just, it is what it is. I love books. I read them. It's important to me. But maybe for someone else, I was talking to someone who was like, I've just stopped spending money on books. I never read them. They're a waste of money. I just don't deal with it. So it's understanding that it's not about good spending or bad spending, right? It's not about restricting yourself, but it's just about being honest about what you want to spend money on. And that doesn't mean that you're never going to feel restricted, right? If you have a certain amount of income, like if I love these beautiful $2 million houses down the street, but I just can't afford it, right? And that's an extreme example, but it's going to be like that sometimes, where you just can't afford that brunch. And if you decide to go to that fancy brunch because your friends want to go, that means that you either need to be that person at the brunch who's like, okay, well, I only got, a salad, so this is all I'm putting in, or you have to end up cutting back on something else. Next, so again, don't keep up with the Kardashians. Don't let peer pressure get to you, guys. Just stick to your budget. It's gonna be all good. And then avoiding high interest debt. Again, credit cards. The interest is so high, guys. I believe at least a few months ago, the average credit card interest rate was about 17%. It can go as high as like 25%, which is wild. So if you have $100 left on your credit card, that's $25 that you're just giving to the bank. That's crazy. That's a quarter of your money, right? So don't create high interest debt. And if you do have any, before you do anything else, we want to pay that down. So again, you're not just throwing money at the credit card companies. Next is what you guys are already doing, right? Starting these healthy money habits early and saving now. And I know that there was a question submitted at the registration. Someone was asking about investing for students. And I think that's a great question, and something, again, because we don't get financial education, you don't learn about why it's important to start investing early, why it's important to start saving early. Similar to how credit cards have a high interest, your high yield savings account, you're investing, right? It creates compound interest. And I don't want to go off on a tangent here, but the point is that the earlier you start saving, the more it will allow your money to grow. And my final point today is to just keep talking about money. Even if you're feeling like, I'm still really confused, she just talked about compound interest, I don't know what that means, or I'm still not sure about this whole budgeting thing. That's okay. By being at least open and saying, hey, you know what? I don't know these things. There's so many resources out there, or maybe you can talk to your friends about it and support each other so that you can continue encouraging this conversation, and you can encourage learning about it instead of continuing to feel like you're alone and you have to feel stressed out or guilty or all these negative feelings that we have about it. So that's it for me, guys. Thank you so much. Happy to answer or try to answer some questions that you may have.
Yeah, so if anyone wants to pop any questions into the live chat or use the raise hand function on Zoom, we can point you out and you can ask Megumi a question. We are running ahead of time, so if anyone has any comments, reflections, you are free to make them. Go ahead, Yabaha.
Okay, thank you, and thank you for the presentation. My question is about the final point. She said we need to start having safe habit and to save money. So during the presentation also, she didn't talk about as we call passive income and investment and all. So do you think that saving money alone can allow us to realize our dreams? And because some of us, we have very big dreams. Thank you.
Yeah, so that's a great question. So that goes a little bit into the paying yourself part, right? So I know I sort of bucketed that all into saving and putting it towards future you. And for example, like your retirement account would be it's an investment vehicle. So no, I don't think that purely saving your money, especially if you're just saving it in cash in your checking account, that means you are losing money to inflation, right? At least in the US, the average inflation target is about 2% per year. And so if your money is sitting in your checking account, not growing, that means you're losing 2% of your money every year. Whereas on average, the stock market over a 10-year period, they say the average is a growth of 7%, right? Of course, you can lose money in the stock market. You can also gain a lot of money in the stock market. I know there's been a lot of talk about, GameStop and whatnot, but just generally speaking, yes, it is important to not only save your money, and when I say save, I do mean a high yield interest account. At least in the US, I'm not sure about Canada, but US, the rates are extremely low right now. I imagine it could also be in Canada just due to the pandemic. So you're seeing things that are like less than 1%. So again, not keeping up with the inflation. But in general, you can find high yield savings account that will save you something above the inflation rate. And so generally the rule of thumb is you want to have emergency savings fund, which is 3 to 6 months of living expenses. So that means, looking at your budget, how much money do you need to live every month, multiplying that by 3 to 6, and then having that in a high yield savings account so that when there is an emergency, you know that it's there. It's not fluctuating with the stock market. You don't have to wait to take it out. You can get that out immediately. And this also goes for goals, right? So if you're planning exam expenses in the next month, 2 months, then you also want to have that in a savings account again, so that you're not waiting to see how the market does and you're able to liquidify it very quickly. Then lastly, so like Yabaha was saying, you want to have your investments for long-term growth. If you want to buy that house, if you want to retire, those things that are a year plus, you want to be investing it. And I should say I'm not a financial advisor. I'm not here to tell you what stocks to pick or anything like that. There's plenty of other people doing that out there. But it is important, yes. So it is important to invest. The way to grow your money is to invest. And I think you had mentioned passive income as well. I think that's another thing that has been very clear in the pandemic, right? All these people who lost their jobs or got pay cuts, furloughed, it has showed how important it is for people to have multiple sources, multiple streams of income, even if it's not passive, even if it's something that you are working just like a side gig or side hustle or something. Finding multiple streams of income can definitely be a great way to grow your income. Yeah, I hope that answered your question. Will the Bitcoin replace the US dollar as we move into the future? I don't know. Who knows what's happening there? I think Elon is trying to get Dogecoin to take off. Yeah, in Quebec, saving account yields are all lower because most online banks aren't able to set up shop here. But oh, interesting. Yeah, I think like the best interest rates we're able to find right now in the US are about like 0.5 or 0.6.
Yeah, it's similar over here. Most of our savings accounts are all through our chartered banks.
Got it. Oh, this is a good question. Is it good to have a financial advisor, or is it better to educate yourself about these things? So actually, not that I'm trying to oh, he is from Yemen. Good point. I'm going to say my advice is going to come specifically from a US point of view. And I do actually have a, like was mentioned before, I have a podcast and I have an interview with a financial advisor to specifically talk about this. And at least for the US, sort of broad guidelines, because it is different for everyone, right? The financial advisor is going to, because they need to make money off of you, whether it's a fee or a commission, or you're paying someone hourly, for example. So unless you're making a ton of money, then no, you do not need a financial advisor. And even if you are making a ton of money, if it's not complicated, then if you're just like, I just have a really high paying job, then you probably don't need to have a financial advisor. This is something that you can educate about yourself. So financial advisors could come in if, you know, you're working, you were working at a startup and you had a lot of equity, and maybe the company IPO'd or got bought, and now you have like your stock options have soared or something like that, and you're dealing with these different complicated things, then a financial advisor can help you. And of course, if you ask a financial advisor, they might say, because they want to make money, of course, not everyone, but they might try to sell you on things like life insurance. There's a lot of overlap between financial advisors and life insurance. But at the end of the day, I think it's important to be able to educate yourself on these things so that you don't need to go to a financial advisor. Or when you do need to go to a financial advisor, you are able to be upfront about what your money situation is and understand why you are going to someone to help you manage your money. Because if you, like I said before, you just have one stream of income coming in and you just happen to be making a ton of money, then you should just be able to contribute to a retirement account, have your emergency fund, and be able to invest yourself, is my belief. And now we don't have to pay someone else to do it and lose money because you worked hard for that money. Can you recommend any books, other resources to learn more? Yes, absolutely. There's a ton of resources online. There's, outside of books, actually, I'm going to give you a couple. Investopedia.com is a great place for financial literacy. They also talk a lot about investing. NerdWallet is another site. I guess I could type it here, nerdwallet.com. There's another person, let me find her website, called the Millennial Money Woman. She has a lot of information. She actually, I've interviewed her on my podcast. She's great. She actually also started a nonprofit to talk about and mentor people and help them with their money in her area. And she has a bunch of budgeting guidelines, investing guidelines. She sort of breaks down bigger terms like compound interest, dollar cost averaging, to make it a lot more approachable. And she is, in fact, a certified financial planner. She's a financial advisor. She works in finance. So she is a very great source that I trust as well. There's also, I don't know what her website is, but there's a podcast called Money Memories. It's on NPR somewhere. She's also great. She talks kind of like what we talked about earlier about what people's different experiences with money have been. So there is definitely a ton of resources, whether it's through books, websites, podcasts, what have you. There is a lot out there. And I think the tough thing is that sometimes it can feel super overwhelming. There's a lot of terms that might get thrown at you, especially if it's something that you're new to. Yes, my podcast. I also have a podcast. If it's something that's new to you, that's why speaking of my podcast, that's why I started my podcast, right? Because I was broke, in debt, and I knew I needed to get my shit together, but I didn't want to have to pay someone to do it. And I was like, I'm going to figure this out myself. And I went online, and all these resources were like super old white dudes were like, give me your $1,000 and I'll grow it, or here's what to do with your thousands of dollars of savings. I was like, oh my God, I have like $10. What am I supposed to do with this? So I think the key is finding a book that works for you. There's books like The Intelligent Investor is one that gets referred to a lot. What's the one? Sorry, there's one called The Richest Man in Babylon. Here, I'll take this in. That gets recommended a lot as well. That's great. The Richest Man in Babylon. What was the other one I said? Oh, The Intelligent Investor. These are kind of more Intelligent Investor. These are definitely more investing focused versus just personal finance focused. Some accounts to follow also, especially for the women on here, Ellevest, ELLEVEST. They actually do robo investing, which means it's like automated investing. But even if you don't want to invest through them, I don't invest through them or anything. I just think that their account shares some great advice, especially for women in investing. And yes, my podcast is called Myth Money Moves on the Believe Podcast Network, distributed everywhere. And I also have a new website called Money with Megumi, where I'll be adding some more information on there as well. But I do have some transcripts of some of my podcast episodes available there too. And I try to break down the more complicated aspects because it's also new or was new to me. So it's me doing a bunch of research and trying to make it easier to digest. And I also talk about some of the larger issues like the racial wealth gap, the gender pay gap, and things like that. Yeah.
Everyone can keep their questions coming, or if no one has any more questions for Megumi, we can start to wrap up today's event. So just drop in the chat, see how you're doing.
Sorry, I was just gonna say, if someone does have a question that they don't feel comfortable asking, or if they think of something later, I think on the next slide is some of my contact information. You can follow me on Instagram, Twitter, and DM me there. Just say you had a question from this event. Well, thank you guys. I had a lot of fun.
So ultimately, first of all, thank you, Megumi, for coming with us and speaking with us today. It is so amazing to have you here and to speak in all your knowledge and expertise in terms of this, because we as students, some of us don't know anything. I frankly really don't know anything. So I now have a better idea of how to pay off my credit card. Thank you. So anyone here who is not a member of Life Literacy or just wants to know more information, I still invite you to stay connected with all of us. We love to do events like these. We have so many things in the works, so please follow us on Facebook, like us on Instagram, visit our website, our new website, actually. If I use presenter view, you might end up seeing this, but it's fine. I can post that into the chat. Visit our website and see more things. And we also have new events coming up, and I would ask that you are going to be sent a post-event survey that I would really, really, really appreciate everyone filling out, because that is just how we make all of our events better and how we know that you're enjoying our events, Life Literacy. And we appreciate every single one of you who comes and does that. But if you would like to get connected with Megumi and stay connected with Megumi, she has we have different options. So you can follow her on Instagram. She just put her stuff in the chat. You can follow Instagram, Twitter. You should definitely subscribe to her podcast if you want to know more information about financial literacy and all the really cool topics that she'll be talking about. And she has a new website. I highly recommend go check it out and definitely stay in contact with her. All this information will also be shared with you in our follow-up email if you have any questions for her. And to all of us here, if you are interested in more events with Life Literacy, I highly recommend checking these out. Upcoming in our education is a human rights series. It is a 12-part series, 12 months of the year, 12 events that the events team is working on. We are talking about various barriers and different things that impact people's education. And in regards to commemorating Black History Month and acknowledging our past, we are going to be talking about racial literacy and the impact it has on anti-Black racism. In a more North American perspective, we are going to be hosting Tina Strawn, who is an anti-Black racism advocate, and she is also an entrepreneur and nonprofit director, and she'll be leading our workshop on this day, February 20th at 2 p.m. We also, at Life Literacy, really prioritize mental health. We are compiling a list of various mental health resources. We've been doing this since December from our mental health event, Students Mental Health During COVID-19. That was a really amazing event, awesome fostering with connections worldwide, and we are still working on that. And we are going to be teaming up again with Toronto's Cuddle Couple, a couple therapy group, who is going to be leading us in guided meditation workshops just in time for final season. They have decided they wanted to coordinate a series with us, so there will be tons of dates that will be released soon, and I highly recommend everyone checks them out. And we also have a book club. The book club, I will be sending you the link in your email. Disregard that slide. We have redeveloped the Life Literacy book club called Read, Educate, Advocate, Develop. It'll be now on bookclubs.com, which is a much more streamlined platform, much easier to access. And I really hope that everyone here gets to check it out and gets to come join us there. But I am not done. We need your help. So Lives for Literacy at the current moment, we are working on registering as a official charity in Canada. And to do so, we have to register with the CRA. We have so many things to fill out, but we need your help to do so. And the link will be sent to all of you, but if I do this again with the presenter view, I can't even access my notes right now, but it's fine. We will send you the link again to our GoFundMe. If you can donate, I really do ask that you do in any means that you are able. There's no minimum, there's no maximum. We would just like to have you be a part of our amazing organization and be a part of our story. And any and all donations is super appreciative. We are about halfway to our goal right now, and we are so excited to see where the future takes us. And we hope that every single one of you will get to be a part of that. So once again, I would just like to thank all of you for coming today. And most importantly, I would like to thank our speaker, Megumi Smisson, who led this amazing, amazing workshop. I do not think we could have gotten anything better. This was awesome. I am sure everyone here is super appreciative of your amazing expertise, and you are definitely going to get a bunch of new subscribers to your podcast. So thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you guys. This was fun.
Any and all information that we are going to be sharing here, there will be a follow-up email with the post-event survey and all the links that we talked about. And we will be comprising the slide deck into the outline function. So any information that we want to share with you all, or we need to share with you all, you'll get. So don't fret if there's anything that you weren't clear on or you want to take down.